So to my left, this young lady is named Willie Udell. She has spent 4 years, around 4 years, give or take, as the music coordinator at Lionsgate Films, where she did such films as Warrior and a small film called Hunger Games, you might have heard of. And this is actually her first, I believe, music supervisor credit, which she shared with my buddy John Houlihan, who is the vice president of the Music Supervisors Guild. John has worked on many, many feature films, documentaries like Waiting for Superman, and feature films like Training Day, Denzel Washington, an amazing film. We met even before he did Austin Powers. We met when he was actually a coordinator a long time ago. That's how old I am. But he did Austin Powers, and Austin Powers is by the Shagged Me, amongst many, many other films and great TV shows, worked in commercials. So give it up for my panelists, esteemed panelists. So obviously, let's just go back a little bit. So I believe you met Mike Myer on Austin Powers, right? So talk about meeting him and how that relationship started and the collaborations ever since.
Yeah, I met Mike on Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, the first one. And that was kind of a nice project because it was a little bit off the grid, and Mike was kind of reinventing himself, and there was no commercial pressure on that one. Jay Roach was the director. He was awesome, and we just kind of made it in a bubble, and we got to be really creative, and we didn't have to answer to anybody. It was New Line Cinema, which was Bob Shayan, some awesome old school film studio heads.
We had some fun there.
Very eccentric time. A lot of personalities back there then, and then Austin Powers, the first one hit, and it was kind of a surprise.
It's a fluke.
Yeah, and then the second one was all of a sudden we were a summer movie, and there was all kinds of pressure. And then the third one, we were a trilogy and the third part of a franchise, and there was even more pressure. So each Austin Powers was extremely different. So starting on the kind of the small scope with Mike and going through all that was, we bonded through it all. And Mike's a very intense filmmaker and super thorough, and I was able to keep up with his energy and invest in the projects as much as care as much as he did. So it's just been great since then. Yeah,
and a little known story. When I was the soundtrack guy at New Line at the time, and this movie was just this weird little nugget, and I begged every record label to give me a soundtrack deal because I didn't have money to do all the music we needed. And nobody wanted to do it. People saw the movie like, that movie's weird. What's going to happen with that movie? And the only company was Hollywood Records, a guy named Mitchell Levitt stepped up and said, yeah, I'll give you $250,000 or whatever the number was then, which was low for in that crazy day of $1 million soundtracks. And we made a record that has stood the test of time. And Mike and your taste in music was fantastic, and Jay Roach. So cut to the forward land. So how did you and Willa get together on this movie and work with Mike? How early did you guys know about it, and what was the process?
Well, I was in pretty early with Mike and on as a co-producer and music supervisor, and Mike essentially was making this as a labor of love. He had been begging Shep to make a movie, allow Shep to make a movie, for Mike to do it, and Shep didn't want to. He wanted to be behind the cameras. That's what he's done for decades, and he wanted to keep that up. And Mike calls me, and sometimes we have very long conversations, and I'm always writing pages of notes when I talk to Mike. So after that first phone call, I look down, and I see phrases like the Pope's roadie. And Mike was talking about how Shep is the Pope's roadie. Oh, you wouldn't believe this guy does this and does that. And then Mike also said to me excitedly that Shep has 52 cards in his deck, and I've only seen 24. So I look at my notes, and it goes 52 cards, only 24. So anyway, Mike was just fascinated by Shep, and almost like the typical audience person, I kind of had heard of him. I knew a little bit about Shep, but I really didn't know, the depth, and I didn't know where Shep was coming from and all that stuff. So Mike essentially, on his own, he just made an 11-minute little sizzle reel. And he went into, in New York, to A&E Films, to A&E Network, has this thing called A&E Indie. So he went in there, and all of a sudden, this little 11-minute sizzle reel started becoming a real movie.
Yeah, and Shep Gordon's an interesting character. I actually met him years ago. I used to go to Maui for vacation, and I'd hear about this guy, Shep Gordon, and through a friend who was a manager, he's like, yeah, I'm going to be in Maui, and you should come to this guy's New Year's Eve party. And this guy has, as you can tell, all those scenes with all those people are at his house. So my wife and I go to this party, and there's Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger and all these people, and I end up meeting a friend of mine who's been my friend ever since that night 15 years ago, who is a big manager, and we literally became friends, and that was the first time. And my daughter's here tonight, and I joke with her. I said, you know, you see that lawn? She goes, yeah. I go, when you were 2 or 3 years old, you had a play date with Sammy Hagar's kid on that lawn, New Year's Day, the next day, because Shep's like, yeah, you should come over and bring your kids, and Sammy will bring his kids, and we'll drink some Cabo Wabo tequila. She had just launched. That was the first, they didn't even talk about that. Like, Shep was responsible for that whole Sammy Hagar rebirth and the Cabo Wabo, and you realize these guys who are behind the scenes, like Shep, the impact they had, but how he does, you know, personally, I just personally had brought, you know, my kids together with Sammy Hagar's kid, random, but we needed something to do on New Year's Day. Anyway, so Willa, so how did you get involved with John, and tell us about your part in the whole thing and how you liked working on it?
Well, I loved working on it, and how I got involved with John was answering a phone call at like 9 in the morning one day. John and I had worked together when I was at Lionsgate. He supervised a few of our films, and that's where our paths crossed, and I was very fortunate enough to get a telephone call from John, and I knew nothing about Shep, and I did a little quick research so I could sound like I knew a little bit what I was talking about, and got very excited very quickly because music, love it, food, love it, two of my favorite things.
It covers a lot of bases.
In one film. So.
Yeah, Willa was always crushing it at Lionsgate, and I worked on Red 2, which was kind of an intense project, and I feel like more Lionsgate, but I can't remember. But anyway, I really had a high comfort value with her, and I sent an email to her former boss, Tracy McKnight, and I CC'd her, and something came back, auto reply, like I'm no longer at Lionsgate.
She just left the building.
So, meanwhile, I'm looking at this movie. We ended up with 87 pieces of music in this movie. The time I called Willa, we had about 128. So when she first came over to my office, from the Alice Cooper song, and I said, you know, Willa, welcome to my nightmare. You know, we have 128 pieces of music to deal with here, you know, and of course, every piece of music has multiple owners, and you have to track it all down, and one person can upset the apple cart and drive a price through the roof.
All right, so question while I'm remembering. So if you notice, this movie is scored with all songs, which is incredibly rare. Talk about the idea. Did Mike always have the idea that he was not going to score this film and he was just going to use all pieces of music that you guys had to license?
Yeah, we had contemplated a composer, and there's a recording artist that we spoke with, and we were pretty close to engaging, but the money was so tight on this, and Mike, like a lot of filmmakers I work with, in some ways they'd rather have the bird in hand. He knows if a piece of music works for 28 seconds, he doesn't want to lose it, you know? So
Temp Love is a,
Temp
when
Love.
You could afford it, I guess it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Did you clear it on a most favored nations basis, or did you have different tiers?
Yes, we kind of had a top tier MFN.
Which would be the Radiohead tier.
I'm not going to name names, but we were in big trouble. I mean, at times, Willa, this music budget was over $700,000, and you know, the reason why I think Mike and I get along is and the reason why Willa was a great team member for me is we care as much as the filmmaker, and even though the reach out and touch somebody's hand was prohibitively expensive when we started, we just didn't stop. You know, we just kept knocking it down and down and down and down, and we just wanted that moment to be, you know, felt in pop culture, and it was an important part of Shep's story, an amazing moment in Teddy Pendergrass.
It's funny because I actually looked at it and I was like, I was there at Live Aid. That's what I was telling my daughter. I was like, I was there, and I hadn't thought about it in years. And then you realize, oh my God, I was there, and that was an amazing moment because the guy I was with was from Philadelphia, and his father was Teddy Pendergrass's lawyer early. So for him, it was incredibly special. I didn't really know the music that much, but he was crying because he knew Teddy, and it was just, it all comes back when you see these kind of great things.
Yeah, but you know, Alice Cooper would have liked us to have everything he ever did for free in the film, but he's got partners on all of his songs. You know, there's 4 or 5 songwriters on some things, so we're tracking all over the world to get everybody to agree to this price. So the prices were kind of all over the place, and we were in big trouble. And there was one song, and I'm not going to mention the artist because I don't want to get flooded with calls, but they gave us this super low price. This is a very, you know, millions and millions of albums, you know, sold kind of a group. And once we got that that became our top tier, and that was kind of like our rejuvenated us on our clearance drive, and we were able to say to everybody else, hey, if they're only getting this, you got to come down
Well, that's
to
a
that.
music supervisor's favorite trick in the book. You know, if you get Bob Dylan or you get the Doors or you get somebody great, then you go, dude, I can't pay you more than the Doors.
Yeah, well, and that's why I love bringing Willa on, because clearing songs, it's a lot of cat and mouse, you know, and there's a lot of psychological and emotional, and there's a kind of a whole arc to clearing a song. And with a second person on my team, I'm able to say, you contact this person, I'll go here, we'll do here, and then as a backstop, I can call this person up here. And we just were able to strategize and just keep working people. And luckily, we had months, you know, we had months to deal with it. So it was that 700,000 kept going down and down and down and down.
I think we also took a cue from Shep's book and tried to practice compassionate business with all of our contacts, and that served us well.
Yeah, we tried to teach.
And maybe we phoned in a few
The
coupons.
Zen, right, the Zen and coupons.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, people in the licensing world, the Warner Brothers folks, they knew who Shep was. But, you know, people with Teddy Pendergrass's publishing, you know, everybody's kind of new. They don't even know who I am because I've been around too long. Right. So, and it's interesting. It's actually harder than ever these days, I feel, to cash in favors, because every publisher and every major licenser, they have so many people and so many splintered things. The person that we have to go to for the documentary clearance has no idea that I just paid $175,000 for X song of their catalog for Red 2.
It's all segmented.
Yeah, so so it's rough, and yeah, we just had a lot of persistence.
And besides clearing, you know, the clearing battle stories, what was your favorite moment, both of you guys, in the film musically, for both of you guys separately? Question.
For me, probably Radiohead, you know, because I think that whole little section of the movie gives the film some depth, and you know, asking Radiohead for the favor of clearing that song, we led with the scene description of, and we actually sent him a link of it, and you know, the description was something along the lines of, Shep Gordon talks about how fame has no intrinsic value.
Oh yeah, Tom York loved that one.
Going right
to it,
right to the common ground with Tom York. You know, so they were down, and they were down with it. That was my
Anything
favorite.
different from you?
You know, I was actually going to say the same thing, not to be a...
This is the second time seeing it, and it really hit me this
Yeah.
time hard because it's such an amazing song.
Yeah, I have a tied for first I'd like to mention, which is the Wake Up Everybody was great. Now, Mike Myers was so fiscally responsible that he was, you know, it's a puzzle when you have, you know, upwards of 100 songs. If we keep this, that, and that, we lose that, you know. And so there were a lot of other huge songs in the film, like at the very beginning of the movie, when Shep and Alice Cooper are driving through the golf course on the golf cart, Mike Myers had Mike Flowers' Pops Light My Fire, which of course is a Doors copyright. So we were able to switch that out with a library track, you know, we went from, you know, six-figure deal down to hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, same thing with Guess Who, No Time, things like that.
We switched out so many, and Mike Myers needed to stay on budget, not just in the music, but overall in the film. So he was ready to serve up and boot out Wake Up Everybody, and Will and I were like, no, Mike, you got to keep that, you know? I mean, I actually even wanted to bring it back as the end title, but we couldn't afford that. But we were like, that's a really important song and I love that visual of that archive footage of the guy with his head on the turntable. So we were able to convince Mike to keep that.
And did you get to spend any time with Shep during the process? And what was his, was he involved musically at all? Did he have votes? You know, did he say, dude, I'd love to have this song if you can get it?
Shep was incredibly helpful, lots of phone calls and lots of emails, but I did not meet Shep in person until we showed the film at the Toronto Film Festival, which was last August, I guess, or September. Yeah, but I mean, dozens and dozens of phone calls, and he was incredibly helpful sometimes. And then some things I kind of would procrastinate on, and then we finally call Shep for help on it, and then he'd go, well, I really can't help you with that one. Will and I would be like, oh my God, we got to start from scratch. So,
right, because you're thinking the Zen master is going to just get it done.
And also, we didn't want to bother him. He's not working on the movie, you know. It's about him. You know, I don't want to make him the music supervisor. So we were trying to do all we could without having to, you know, push the Shep button.
So, Willa, for you, clearing music inside a studio where you did for Lionsgate for a number of years versus independently on a small doc, how was it different for you to go from something like Hunger Games and something small like this, but yet powerful?
I mean, it's different in nearly every way, coming from a studio to doing something independently. I mean, I think one of the biggest differences is when I say it to someone, like, we literally have no more money, I mean it. Like, and at a studio, people can question that.
Yeah, they don't quite believe that.
You know, in the studio system, like, temp love is a powerful thing. And that was something that was amazing to me about Mike. When we would come to him and say, this is throwing us way over budget, he's like one of the first people I've ever seen who's been so responsive to be like, okay, let's start again. Or he was very receptive to change and obstacles.
And I'll say this, which maybe you'll pick up on the next time you watch it, because everywhere we could cheat, we would. I mean, there's so many Alice Cooper re-records or live versions, or, you know, there are times when we, like, MC5 kick out the jams. You know, we had to have that. But there were other songs where we knew we could cheat it. You know, there's a moment in the movie where they're talking about the brilliant production value of American Woman. And it's a live version of American Woman. It's not that great a production value, but it's short enough, and it worked. And Mike has a really good sense of you know, what works and what doesn't. So wherever we could cheat, we did.
Has anybody here ever met Shep Gordon?
Wow.
He's that kind of guy. So tell us about the film, what the plans are distribution-wise, and how Weinstein's been with, you know, getting the word out.
Weinstein Company's been great. The interesting thing is, it was never supposed to have theatrical distribution. It was just supposed to be on A&E Network and, you know, iTunes and whatever. And it played so well at the Toronto Film Festival that the Weinstein Company picked it up, which is pretty funny because we always had that Harvey Weinstein joke in the body of the film. But it's all been a really pleasant surprise. So.
And for you, how is the difference of working on a doc versus the major feature, besides the fact that the licensing people don't quite translate the fact that you've just written them a big check versus the small check you're about to write them?
Not that much difference for me. You know, I mean, it's easy, like a film like this and a boss and a friend like Mike, it's easy to care about this as much as I did about Goldmember or something. So pretty much the same.
So I'd like to thank these two people. I'd like to thank the Recording Academy. I'd like to thank Drew and Paul for taping this tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it, and drive home safe. For more Q-Score, please check us out at emPOWERme.tv to find out what goes on behind the curtain and how the film and TV music gets made. It happens right here. Tune in.